Our species almost didn't make it. Not thousands left, not millions, just a handful. Fewer than the people in one small town. And the ones who pulled us back from the edge? They weren't the strongest, the fastest, or the ones with the biggest teeth. By every rule of nature, somebody else should have survived. But it was these guys. So who were they? And you're carrying the proof of that disaster inside you right now. Take two people from opposite ends of the earth, a fisherman in Alaska and a hunter from the Australian outback. Genetically, they'll turn out to be more alike than two chimpanzees from two neighboring groves in a single African valley. There are 8 billion of us, and we are unnervingly identical. That's nothing to be proud of. It's not an achievement. It's a scar. And to understand where it came from, we have to go back to the moment we almost ceased to exist and find out what pulled us back from the edge. First, what actually happens when a species nearly disappears? Geneticists call it a bottleneck. Picture a population as a big handful of colored marbles. Disaster strikes, famine, cold, disease, and almost all the marbles vanish. A pitiful few are left, and the entire future of the line is rebuilt from whatever survived. The richness of color is gone forever. This is exactly what once happened to us, or rather, it seems, more than once. A quick, honest caveat, because the numbers ahead are frightening. When scientists say 1,000 people were left, they don't mean a literal head count. They mean the effective population, the number of those who actually left descendants. There may have been far more people alive, and the so-called mitochondrial Eve, the oldest unbroken female line that reaches all the way down to us, roughly 150 to 200,000 years old, was not the only woman on Earth. Hers is simply the one line that made it to the present day without a single break. Thousands of others lived alongside her. Keep that in mind, otherwise what comes next gets too terrifying. And it does. In 2023, the journal Science published a study that left anthropologists breathless. Chinese geneticists ran the genomes of 3,000 living people through a new mathematical model and stumbled onto the trace of an ancient catastrophe. Somewhere between 930 and 813,000 years ago, our ancestors nearly vanished. By their estimate, only around 1,280 breeding individuals were left, and it stayed that way for almost 117,000 years. About 99% of the entire line was wiped out. For longer than our own species has even existed, humanity hung by a thread thinner than the population of a single small town today. And again, honesty over drama, this finding is disputed. Other teams have argued the crash could be a statistical mirage, an artifact of the method itself, not a real event. Some groups' numbers line up, others don't. So treat it as a gripping hypothesis, not something carved in stone. The next catastrophe, though, definitely happened. About 74,000 years ago, on the island of Sumatra, the supervolcano Toba erupted, the largest known eruption in the last couple of million years. Around 2,500 cubic kilometers of rock blasted into the sky. The ash column punched into the stratosphere, and layers of that ash still turn up in India, on the floor of the Indian Ocean, even in the glaciers of Greenland. Scientists believe a volcanic winter followed. By estimates and climate models, several years of cold and a drop in average global temperature of roughly 3 to 5 degrees. Picture it, carefully, through the eyes of someone alive back then. The sky choked gray for weeks, the sun a dim smudge, ash settling on skin and into the water. Small hunting bands lived hand to mouth, from one good hunt to the next. For them, a blow like that could easily be the last. For a long time, textbooks carried a beautiful version of events. Toba was the thing that squeezed humanity down to a handful of freezing survivors. The story was so good it got retold for decades. There's just one problem. It seems it didn't happen that way at all. In recent years, archaeologists have dug up sites both beneath the ash layer and right on top of it, in India, in Africa, and the people there lived as if nothing had happened. Stone tools sit below the ash and above it, as if their owners just shrugged and went back to their day. Toba's ash shows up in Lake Malawi in East Africa too, Yet there's almost no sign of a brutal winter there. And DNA from dozens of mammal species shows that almost none of them suffered a sharp population crash at the right time. So Toba was a monstrous explosion. But it wasn't the end of the world. It was more like an exam, and we passed it. And here is the most interesting part. How exactly did we pass? Part of the answer is hidden in caves on the southern coast of Africa, at a place called Pinnacle Point. While groups deep inland were dying off, the people on the coast discovered the sea. They gathered shellfish at low tide, a steady food source that didn't depend on some drought far out on the plains. The ocean became their pantry and their refuge at once. But the real weapon wasn't food, and it wasn't stone. It was the brain and the tongue. Starting around 70,000 years ago, our ancestors began mastering more and more different environments. Forests, savannas, deserts. Not because the climate softened, but because they learned to survive in them. And once they learned, they shared. Different groups met and traded tricks. Where to find water in the dry season. Which roots and shellfish save you, and which ones kill. An idea born in one head could save people hundreds of miles away, generations later. No one knew everything, but together, they knew enough. Of the many attempts to leave Africa, essentially only one worked, around 50,000 years ago. Every human being outside Africa descends from that one small group. You, the person who's annoying you right now, and the driver who cut you off on the highway this morning. That's why we're so alike. That poverty of color in our handful of marbles is a memory of the times when only a few thousand of us were left. And it has a flip side. A thin genetic deck makes the whole species more vulnerable to a new disease because almost everyone carries roughly the same defense. Chimpanzees, who lived through fewer crashes, hold more diversity than our entire species does. We carry that ancient crowding inside us. Every person on Earth is your very distant cousin. All of us squeezed through the same needle's eye. And every single time, what saved us wasn't a fang or brute force. It was the connection between people. Thinking ahead and sticking together where alone we had no chance. But that little group that walked out of Africa didn't stop. In just a few thousand years, its descendants crossed on foot all the way to Australia and to the very edge of the Americas. How did a handful of people get from Africa to the far side of the world? And why did they keep walking into the unknown with no way of knowing whether anything was even out there? That's the next video. Subscribe so you don't miss it.